So I talked in my last video about how I think tools like the Laravel installer can help us create new applications quickly. Not just the code, but all the other kind of annoying, busy work you've got to do, like initializing a Git repository, setting up the remote, setting up your CI, all that kind of stuff. So I've built a tool that I think handles this pretty well. Let's take a little look at it. I'm going to open this up, and you can see here I've got a fresh Laravel application. I've just run Laravel new and I've created this. And so from here, I'm going to run this setup command. And this is a package that you can install globally with Composer. I'm going to run it via CPX. But as soon as I run that, we're going to see a couple of things. First of all, it's setting up a PHP project. It's already detected in the current working directory that we're in that there is a Composer JSON. It is a PHP project already. It would be running your Composer install and getting your dependencies and doing that kind of thing if it hasn't already. After it's done that, we're going to go through this setting up common tooling step. First thing it's going to do is check, have you got a test framework already? And because we've got a Laravel application, I have Pest installed. But moving on from that, it's going to ask us, well, do you want a browser testing tool as well? So I can go and select Dusk as well and start to install that. It's going to go and install it behind the scenes. It might take a little moment. But it's not only install Dusk as a Composer dependency, it's also run the artisan Dusk install command under the hood. Next up, it's asking if we have a preferred static analysis tool. It's something that most new projects should probably have. And because it knows that we're in a Laravel project as well, it's not just installing PHP Stan or SARM. It's given us the option to use Larastan or the SARM Laravel plugin. So it's a little bit context aware, and it's going to give you the best tools for whatever project you're currently in. So we'll run this, and we will install Larastan. It's going to take a moment again. And you'll notice here, not only did it install Larastan, but it also created the phpstan.neon config file that's needed for it. Okay, cool. So that's the common tooling setup. The next thing it's going to prompt you through is, do you want to set up a Git repository? Well, yes, I do want to set up a Git repository. We'll do that, and it will initialize a Git repository. It will add all of the current files in the project to that Git repository and then commit them. And that means that we've got a solid point of the code that happened in our repository before we started writing any code. So if we go and start to make tweaks and stuff, our commit history is going to show what changes we specifically made ourselves rather than just the fresh Laravel app. So we got that done. Then it prompts us, do you want to set up a remote repository? This is like, I find it usually a pain. You got to go away. You got to go to github.com/new. You've got to type in a repo name, do it, copy the commands, come back into your project and do that. Let's see what this does. I say yes, and it goes, oh, it looks like you've got the GitHub CLI. Do you want to use that to create the remote repository? And I could select yes. Or if I didn't have it, or I selected no, it's going to give me this option to enter a remote repository URL. And then it's going to do all of the Git commands under the hood to create the linking between it, to push everything up to the remote repository, and in order to set up the origin on your local environment. Pretty handy. There's also this little helpful thing here that's going to give you a link that you can just click on if you're going to create one on GitHub. If I cancel out of this and come back in, you'll notice if I run this command again, it's not asking for all the tooling because that's already installed. It's detected we've got that, so it's not going to ask us for the same stuff. So we're going to come back to setting up a Git repository. If I already have a Git repository, which I do here, it's going to warn us before we just go and blindly do that. So I can explicitly come in and say, yeah, let's clear the Git repository again and start from fresh. I want to set up a remote, and I want to use the GitHub CLI. So I can do that. It's going to ask me if I want it to be a public or private repo. I'll select public. And you can see it's gone and created a repo using the GitHub CLI at that URL. And it's also set up the remote origin to that as well. So now I can push the code to that remote repository. And that's the Git setup complete. The last thing that it does right now is set up a CI workflow. So if I come in here Because I've set GitHub as a remote repository, it's detected that I probably want GitHub Actions here as well. Similarly, if I had a GitLab remote repository, it would automatically detect and select GitLab CI as the preferred solution. Because we're on GitHub here, let me choose GitHub Actions, and that's it. It's just created the files for me. So if I come back in here and start to look at what it's created, obviously I've got the PHP stand.neon file, which is set up in order to pull in the Laristan extension and other things that Laravel needs. But the GitHub CI is also a bit self-aware, where it's doing all of the steps that you need in order to run anything, but it's specifically using the tooling that we selected during our installation process. So it's aware that we have PHP unit as our test runner. It's aware that we have PHP stand that we set up. It's aware that we have Pint in our project as well. So it's detected that and automatically set up the right commands to be able to run that in CI. So if I wasn't talking through this, I could go through in a minute, 2 minutes, just answering these questions and have an entire environment set up in CI with absolutely everything for my project without having to think about it and go and run and figure out like 20 different commands or copying code from old projects to get the CI workflows working. It just works.